Welcome back to Ryan on College Football. I am your host. We are going to be talking Big 12 today. Super interesting conference, super fun conference. The parity in the Big 12 makes it a really fun conference to watch. You have to watch every week all of the games. There's no team that you can just dismiss out of hand because the talent level is so equal across the conference. It makes it for a really fun watch, as Josh Pate has dubbed it. It's America's conference. Super fun conference to watch. And it'll be another really fun season here in the Big 12 this year. We're going to start our preview here with Iowa State. They're getting Rocco Becht back. The big question is, who is he going to be throwing to? They lost Jaden Higgins. They lost Jalen Knoll, both over 1,000-yard guys. So that's a major point of concern for them, is how do they replace those players? They're going to need ECU transfer Chase Howell to live up to the hype. He was a really big target in the portal. Lots of teams wanted to pick him up, and he went to Iowa State. So that's a transfer they need to pan out. They do get leading rusher Carson Hansen back. That should be big for them. But the big thing on the other side of the football is they need to get better at stopping the run, and that starts up front. And there are still lots of questions about how good they're going to be up front. I'm not sure where they're going to get production on that side of the football. And in the Big 12, there are teams that really like to run the football. One of those teams they're going to open the season with. So that's a major question for them if they want to compete for a conference title, is how are they going to be able to stop the run. Let's take a look at their schedule. Like I mentioned, they're starting in a couple of days here with Kansas State in Ireland. Going to be a super fun matchup. Two teams that are intending to compete for the conference title, expected to compete for a conference title. Will be a really fun game. Then great rivalry matchup, obviously, always another game where they're going to need to figure out how to stop the run. In Iowa, otherwise, not the craziest schedule in the world. They will play Arizona State. They will play Colorado, but very manageable schedule for a team that expects to compete. This Kansas State game, I think, is going to be massive for them. They really need to come out hot in that game, and I think this is a team that will compete in the conference. Let's take a look at the team who they faced in the conference championship last year and ended up beating them in Arizona State. Really magical season for them last year. And to top it all off, they are second in returning production this season behind only Clemson. They get Sam Leavitt back. They get Jordan Tyson back. I think a lot of people are sleeping on how important that is, because the only games they watched of Arizona State last year were the Big 12 championship game and the playoff game against Texas. Both games he didn't play in, but he's an 1,100 plus yard receiving guy, 10 touchdowns whenever they needed a big play through the air. Jordan Tyson was the guy on the other end, on the receiving end of that play. Super huge return for them. Will be an important piece of their offense. But obviously the main question for them is, how do they replace what Cam Scadaboo meant to them? He was their all-everything guy. You saw it in the Texas game, throwing for a touchdown, making a huge play downfield, through the air. He threw a touchdown, runs for, he did everything for them. So how do you replace that production and what he meant, and how he affected their culture? And I don't have an answer for that. They're returning a lot in the secondary on the other side of the football, and the biggest thing for them, one of their keys to success, are how good they were at stopping the run, and that should continue again this year as they bring a lot back up front. So I expect this team to be right back in the hunt for a conference title, a playoff appearance, somebody that can be dangerous if they make that playoff. I expect really good things from Arizona State. Big Kenny Dillingham guy. I love the direction of this program. Let's take a look at their schedule. Nothing crazy in the non-conference. Mississippi State has been terrible. But going on the road is always tough. So you're going to have to pull that game out. That game at Baylor is going to be a challenge. I expect Baylor to be a much improved team this year. Another team that I think will compete. You get that Iowa State game and Texas Tech, another big game for them in Week 8. We'll see how it plays out. I think it should be an exciting year for Arizona State fans. Something the rest of the country should be paying attention to too. It will be a really fun season out down there. Then let's talk about Kansas State. Had a bit of a disappointing season last year. They do get Avery Johnson back, who expectations were really high for him last year, and he flashed. He showed you why those expectations were so high for him. Flashed lots of upside, but he needs to get more consistent as a passer with his accuracy and decision making. But his athleticism is where he really shines. And Dylan Edwards coming back will be more of a feature this season. I expect they had nearly a top 10 offense, a rushing offense last year, and I expect that to continue with those two guys in the backfield. The big question, I think, for this team is what are they going to do to stop the passing attacks that they're going to see in the Big 12 again. Iowa State, a team that loves to throw the football, and they have lots of questions in the secondary. It didn't perform very well last year. They're not returning a lot to build off of. Sometimes that can be a good thing to just start over, but I think that's a major question for them is how are they going to stop some of these passing attacks that they're going to see. Let's take a look at their schedule. Obviously, huge Week 0 game in Ireland against Iowa State. They get a non-conference game against Arizona on the road there in Week 3. 2-week stretch there of Baylor TCU is one to watch out for right before their second bye week. And then that Texas Tech game, I think, is going to tell you a lot about this team. Another team that kind of needs to get off to a hot start, and they need to avoid the collapse they had at the end of the season last year. They can't have that happen again. They need and that consistency that you're going to see out of Avery Johnson, that you need to see out of Avery Johnson, I think is the key to that. Yeah. So let's talk about Colorado. Who the hell knows what Colorado is going to be next year? I think. Obviously, they're replacing Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, two major cornerstone pieces of their team last year. But even outside of that, they lost a lot of skill talent. You look at the quarterback position, still a battle between Caden Salter and Julian Lewis. I would expect Caden Salter to start Week 1. But we all know, I think, what Julian Lewis is capable of. And I expect him to have a really bright future. So if that season starts to go off the rails, you could see him step in later in the season because I expect great things from him in Boulder. Will we get that this year, I think, is the main question. They are, again, trying to overhaul their offensive line. It's not really worked so far in the past. They really need this to pay off. If you're not going to have the talent of a Shedeur Sanders back there, you want an offensive line that's not Swiss cheese, which is what it's been. And if that line can improve, Dallin Hayden is a guy who we've seen flash some potential. I think if they can get better at blocking the run, then Dallin Hayden could really pop off. He's got explosive potential. We saw it at times last year, and we saw it in certain mop-up duty moments at Ohio State before the transfer. So look out for him. I think this defensive line, anchored by Jaheim Otis, should improve. But, what else are we going to see from the defense? Yeah, let's take a look at the schedule. Really interesting Friday night opening weekend game against Georgia Tech. It's like must-see TV. I think the Auburn-Baylor game is also Friday night. So two great opening weekend Friday night games for us to enjoy next week. Should be really exciting. That closing stretch is brutal. Kansas State and Arizona State in back-to-back weeks to close the season are going to be really important for Colorado if they're expecting to compete. And then that late September, early October stretch where you get BYU, TCU, Iowa State in back-to-back weeks are going to tell us a lot about what this team can be. Should be an exciting year. Looking forward to it. Let's talk Texas Tech. Super high expectations around Texas Tech. They have gone all in, infamously spending lots of money in the portal, bringing in the second ranked portal class this year with 21 kids. They're also sixth in returning production. This is a team that expects to compete. They expect to compete now, and they expect to compete at a very high level. This isn't a team that's, we'd like to win the Big 12. This is a team that expects to win the Big 12 this year. They expect to go to the playoff. They expect to compete in the playoff. I'm a really big Joey McGuire fan. They love him down there. Really high expectations. In Lubbock, Baron Morton needs to have some more consistency, and a major part of that consistency is his health. He needs to stay healthy this season, but he has lots of potential down there. They went really hard on line of scrimmage talent. They should be towards the top of the conference, both sides of the line of scrimmage, and that should be the strength of this team. Let's take a look at the schedule. Could be a fun matchup against Oregon State, but the key here is going to be that late October, early November stretch where you play Arizona State, Oklahoma State, Kansas State. Both those Arizona State, Kansas State games are on the road. That's going to be a challenge. But otherwise, a relatively manageable schedule for a team that expects to be in the Big 12 championship. I think based on what they're bringing back, what they brought in, this is a team that if they do not make a Big 12 championship, will view this season as a failure. And I think there's good reason behind that. But let's take a look next at BYU. Obviously, an unfortunate situation with the honor code and losing Jake Retzlaff at an unexpected time. So that's going to be a major challenge for them, how they replace him at quarterback. But LJ Martin is back in the backfield, averaged over 5 yards a carry. Another guy who, if he can remain healthy, will be a major part of this offense. There are concerns up front for this team, and that is a concern. That's a major concern. That's a thing that could spell trouble for this team if they're not as good up front as they need to be. And so I think the defense is going to be where this team has to shine if they want to do something in the Big 12 this year. Their defensive line doesn't create a lot of havoc in the backfield. Where they did create chaos is they got lots of turnovers. 22 interceptions, which is best in the country, 7 fumbles recovered. Can they do that again? And if not, I'm not sure where this BYU team finds success. But if they can create that kind of chaos again this year, they will be another dangerous team in the Big 12. Let's take a look at the schedule. Colorado game, end of September, I think tells you a lot about what this team can be. Then you get Iowa State, Texas Tech games late in October, early November. Those will be the big games if they're intending to compete. That Cincinnati, UCF, TCU stretch to end the season, I think another important stretch. If they're not going to be a contender, but if they want to have a solid, successful season, those closing stretch games are going to be important for them as well. Let's talk about their Holy War rival in Utah. Strange couple of years down in Utah. Now that you don't have the will he, won't he be injured situation with Cam Rising, you hope that there can there's just more permanent direction. They brought in coordinator quarterback pair Jason Beck and Devin Dampier from New Mexico. They bring a really fun, flashy offense, dual threat offense, or a dual threat quarterback at least. They need more consistency out of Devin Dampier, only completing 58% of his passes last year. You would like that to improve, but really flashy, explosive offense. They bring back 5 starters on the offensive line, so that should be a strength for this Utah team. I expect this offense to be better than it has been, and I expect this defense to be really good as well. They're bringing back last year's leading tackler in Lander Barton and 2023's leading tackler, Lavani Dumani, who missed last season with injury. I think if this offense is right, this defense is going to be good enough for this team to compete. And I think Utah could be special. Let's take a look at the schedule. That Texas Tech game in week 4, that's the one. Circle that one. If Utah is as good as they expect to be, that's the game. That's going to be really fun. That's the game that they're going to come out and start swinging. They do have an Arizona State game, and they play Kansas State. They're getting all of their tough games in this schedule at home. There are a lot of them, right? They play Texas Tech, Arizona State, Kansas State. Baylor's a team I expect to be good. Colorado is interesting. BYU is interesting. Like all teams that can compete, but they get their biggest ones at home. And I think that'll be really important for this team. Let's talk TCU. Another really explosive offense. Josh Hoover threw for almost 4,000 yards last year, and they're going to get him back. Eric McAllister is where they're going to get their explosive plays on the outside from. You need the transfers to come in and solidify the rest of that room for them to have success. On the other side of the ball, I feel confident in their linebacking core. Namdi Obiazer stuffed the stat sheet last year. Caleb Elam's Orr is a really good player. I think their secondary is solid. But the biggest question about this team is on the line of scrimmage. Both sides of the football, there are questions up front. They're going to need that to be solid. They don't need it to be best in the Big 12 because of the skill talent they have outside on both sides of the football, but they need that to solidify. They can't just be blown up every play. They can't get pushed around. If they're getting pushed around, then you can't let your skill talent thrive. So they need to be solid up front, and I think that's the biggest question for TCU is how good are they up front, both sides of the football. Let's take a look at their schedule. Opening weekend, Monday night game against North Carolina. Super fun game. That's going to tell you. I'm not sure actually what that's going to tell you because they're two teams that you're not exactly sure how good are they, and so will be an interesting game. Certainly, don't overreact to that game. However, whatever the result is for either team, but should be a really fun, interesting game. Another out-of-conference rivalry with SMU. Glad they still play that game. We love it when teams play their rivals. But yeah, really tough late September, early October stretch. They play SMU, then Arizona State, then Colorado, then Kansas State, then Baylor. That stretch is going to tell you everything you need to know about this team. Yeah, if this is a team that's going to compete, they're going to have to win some of those. They're going to have to win a lot of those games. So looking forward to that stretch and seeing where this team can go because I think it should be a fun team, regardless of how good it is. Let's talk Baylor. This is my sleeper dark horse Big 12 team. I expect Baylor to be really, really good. They had a really strong close to last season behind a really explosive offense. They were 6th in the country in plays over 20 yards. I expect that to continue. You get Sawyer Robinson back, who is really fun quarterback to watch. Bryson Washington, over 1,000-yard rusher last season. I don't know what else to say about this offense. This offense is really, really fun, really, really good. must-see TV. And I think this defense is going to be a lot better. They're returning 7 starters, including Jackie Marshall and Cooper Lance up front. I think they backfilled through the portal. I expect this defense to be a lot better than what it was last year. I expect a lot of things out of Baylor this year. I think this is a team that is very capable of playing for a Big 12 championship. Should be really, really fun to watch. That Auburn game to start the season, super fun. Their opening 6 weeks will determine their season, right? They play Auburn, then they play SMU the following week, then they play Samford, but then they play Arizona State, then they play Oklahoma State, then they play Kansas State. They're getting a lot of their big games at home, and that is a blessing for them. But that opening 6 weeks before their first bye, that's going to tell you whether this team can compete in the Big 12. Next, let's look at Arizona, a team that had a really, really disappointing 2024 campaign. They do bring back Noah Fafita, who shined in 2023. They are replacing an entire offensive line. That's going to be a challenge. They're overhauling their secondary. This defense was terrible last year. A new defensive coordinator, Danny Gonzalez, is going to need to get everything out of that secondary, which was not good last year. I don't know. I don't see it this year. I'm not sure what the trajectory of this program is right now. But their schedule is workable if they can find that some level of success. They do have tough games against Arizona State, Baylor to end the season, and an Iowa State and Kansas State games early. That Kansas State game, like I said earlier, is technically a non-conference game. Yeah, we'll see. I don't have a lot of faith in this Arizona team, but who knows? Let's talk about another team that had a disappointing 2024 in Oklahoma State. I'm a big Mike Gundy guy. Who isn't? But they're 90th in returning production from had a terrible year, so maybe you don't care that you're not returning a ton of production. They took 41 players out of the transfer portal, which is pretty crazy for a program that didn't replace a head coach. But given where they were last year, I think that overhaul is necessary. I'm just not sure how quickly that's going to mesh. I don't know what the pieces are because I'm not sure Oklahoma State yet knows what the pieces are. So it makes it a really tough team to preview. I'm not sure what we're going to get out of this team. Let's take a look at the schedule. Oregon game early, tough. That Baylor game, I think, is where you find out, is this a team that can compete at all? And otherwise, the schedule is not bad. There's you get a road game against Texas Tech. You do get Kansas State and Iowa State, but it's workable. You need to find a way to win. You need to make a bowl game again. You get games against Houston and Cincinnati and Kansas and UCF. You got to find ways to win those games and push yourself into at least a bowl game so that you can feel good about the trajectory of the program again. Yeah. And let's talk about Cincinnati. They are on the opposite side of that, returning a lot. They're the 22nd in the country in returning production. They get Brandon Sorsby back, who's a threat on the ground as well as in the air, and Evan Pryor, who can be very dangerous in the backfield, returns. There are a lot of new faces in the receiver room. You got to question how well that's going to mesh. But that's where early on in the season, Brandon Sorsby's dual threat ability will help alleviate that concern because you don't have to rely as much on the receiving talent. But if this team is going to do anything interesting in the Big 12 this year, it's the defense that is going to do it. You get transfer corner, Matthew McDoom is going to help solidify the secondary. The linebackers, though, are going to be the core of this defense. They're going to be the heart of this defense. And Dante Corleone up front is really going to anchor that defensive line. He needs some help from his edges, but I think this defense could be really good. Um, let's take a look at the schedule. That Nebraska game, opening weekend, really interesting. Opening weekend this year should be really, really fun. And again, a workable schedule. Iowa State, Baylor are your toughest games. You get both of those games at home. You play at UCF, Oklahoma State. Lots of teams that you expect to struggle a little bit this year. So this is a team. If this is going to work with Scott Satterfield, um, this is a year that Cincinnati needs to be a lot better. They need to show that improvement because this is a schedule that works really well in your favor. Let's talk about another expansion team that has struggled to find their footing in Houston. And just like UC last year, they got a late season upset to give yourself some hope that this is a team that can compete in the Big 12. I'm a really big fan of Willie Fritz. They're also 20th in returning production. I think underappreciated transfer or forgotten about transfer, Connor Weigman from Texas A&M is at Houston. I know he had his struggles at A&M, but one of those struggles was staying healthy. And so I think if Connor Weigman can stay healthy, he can be successful with this team. You bring back Steven Johnson outside, Mari Thomas from UAB, and the deep threat Harvey Broussard from Louisiana. I think this is a receiving core that should be really good. I expect to see an improved product on offense this season. The question is this defense that kept them in games a lot of the time last season lost a lot, and I'm not sure how it reloads. I'm not sure. I think they're going to be better up front, but I don't think their secondary. I'm not sure how they reload those pieces. So we'll see. I think a little bit of a mixed bag in terms of what they're bringing back and what they brought in terms of their offense and defense. They might kind of switch this year in terms of what their strengths are. But let's take a look at the schedule. Another team that gets Oregon State in the non-conference. That Colorado game early is going to be one to watch. Otherwise, not a crazy schedule. You do have to play Texas Tech. You do play Arizona State. But otherwise, lots of workable games here. TCU Baylor to end the season. I think that's going to be really important to them, playing two of those Texas Big 12 teams. You need to establish yourself a little bit here as Houston. If you want to establish yourself as a player, I think you need to start winning those games against the Texas Big 12 teams. So let's talk about another expansion team in UCF. And the big story in the offseason is the prodigal son returns. National championship winning coach Scott Frost is back. This is a team that's going to go through a major overhaul. They're 93rd in returning production. They've got 41 incoming transfers. An ongoing quarterback competition. I'm not sure what this offense is going to look like. That was the Scott Frost calling card at UCF. So I expect schematically them to be good, but what are the Jimmies and Joes? I'm not sure. On the other side of the ball, though, the defense is kind of stacked. The linebackers, the secondary are going to be strengths for this team. Alex Grinch, redemption tour, anyone? I think this defense could be really, really solid. We'll see how it goes. Let's take a look at the schedule. Another team that gets North Carolina in the non-conference. That'll be an interesting game. Otherwise, you see games against Kansas State, Texas Tech, Baylor, all tough games. But otherwise, I think their schedule is pretty workable. You get games against Cincinnati, Kansas, West Virginia, Oklahoma State, teams that might struggle. Games that if you want to show improvement, those are the kind of games that you need to win. Let's talk Kansas next. Disappointing season, and they had a really strong close, but that strong close to the season, I think, shows why that season was so disappointing. I think a lot of people thought that Kansas team could be special, and unfortunately it wasn't. But they do get to return home this year after their stadium renovations are now complete, so they get to play their games at home. Jalen Daniels is back. You are losing Devin Neal, who was a big part of that rushing attack that was 13th in the country last year. And they're overhauling a lot of the rest of the team, especially the defense, which was not very good last year. I'm not sure what to make of that. We'll see how that goes. But Jalen Daniels can be a really electric player. So we'll see how that goes. Could be hoping to see improvement from this Kansas team, get back to a bowl game. Let's take a look at the schedule. Border War alert. They are going to play their rival in Missouri. That's going to be fun for all of us. I'm not sure how fun it's going to be for Kansas. I do expect that to be a loss, but should be a fun game nonetheless. And always glad to see teams play their rivals. Those games against West Virginia and Cincinnati, games that they need to win. UCF, games that they need to win. Otherwise, a little bit of a tough schedule down the stretch with Texas Tech, Kansas State, Iowa State. We'll see. I think this is a schedule that sets up well to make a bowl game. If this is a team that expects to compete, it starts to look tough when you look at it through that lens. But looking at it as a team that's trying to get back to a bowl game, I think this schedule sets up well for them. And let's talk about our last team in West Virginia, another team that has the return of the prodigal son in Rich Rodriguez, and another team that's going to be overhauling their program. They have 54 incoming transfers, which is crazy. They do get Jaheim White, their leading rusher, back from last season. Jamori Robinson on the edge is a stud. We had 10.5 sacks at UTSA last year. But otherwise, I'm not sure what to really expect from this West Virginia team. I think either way, it should be a really fun season in Morgantown. Rich Rodriguez teams were never not fun. Even his Michigan teams, which weren't always good, were fun. And those Rich Rod West Virginia teams in take one were awesome. Let's see how this goes in take two. I think they're going to be fun again. Might not happen this year, but they're going to be good. They're going to be good eventually. Let's take a look at the schedule. Backyard Brawl alert. They are going to be playing their rival. Congratulations. In Pitt. That'll be must-watch TV, if only for the Morgantown, the Mountaineers version of Sweet Caroline. Otherwise, not a crazy schedule. Tough ending stretch there with Arizona State and Texas Tech, but a lot of expansion teams, UCF, BYU, Houston. Like, it is a very manageable schedule for a team that's just looking to show improvement. So we'll see. And with that wraps up our preview of the Big 12 teams. Super fun conference. Really excited to see how it all shakes out. Let me know in the comments who your dark horse teams, who do you expect to be good? If you made it this far, thank you. Drop a like, and I will see you next time.